boy, my thing. It's interesting because I just came across this video. I believe it's somewhat old. Certainly was in a style of a YouTube style that I think in some ways it's interesting because just a tangent. It's interesting that I'm talking about this as I respond. You can I might if I make this hello, if I make this a 511 talks, I will put a link to the video that I'm responding to, which I think is also responding to another video. And you can see the difference in the styles, right? So like I prefer a very colloquial style. I believe this guy was reading a script, right? So I think that's interesting. He had a very logical style though, right? Like he's gonna go into the logical. I'm just gonna put my take on what I think. Sometimes it's hard to refute logic, right? It's sort of like I don't believe two plus two. It's one of those things. Two plus two is four. Well, whatever. But so in other words, like if the logic's sound, you just get a check. But let's think about what he's trying to say. And so this is my preference, right? I prefer to just kind of think about it, but or sort of put it in maybe like meaningful terms for myself, right? So I've heard this before when I first started like watching YouTube. I remember there was a wave of YouTube videos that had this. There's like they used to do like bright on the bright side videos. It's interesting. I think there was like puzzle videos that sort of had this. So the idea, and I might be misquoting it, in which case maybe I should put you guys can somebody I invite somebody to comment. Nobody comments. They used to. I don't know if people commented on my channel before. I think there's sort of like this idea that you're sort of scoping out the YouTubers, but I think that's over now, or I think they've all been scoped out sufficiently, so it's good. But anyway, so the point is that this idea of like, so we're trying to disprove determinism, right? Or sort of throw some shade. Do people say that? That's so weird. Anyway, that's just I'm learning to talk, right? No, but throw some shade on determinism. And how we're doing so is we're saying that a machine is going to predict what I'm going to do, right? So a machine is going to predict whether I'm going to make this a 511 thoughts or not. I'll give you, in my own estimation, the odds are very low, but let's say the machine predicts that I don't, right? And the machine's going to say, you're not going to make this a 511 thoughts. This is not my comfort zone, right? Talking about this, I feel like I'm opening myself up. Someone watches it. Imagine if someone, looks at this 10 years later, like what an idiot. But it is. I mean, that's sort of the sort of thing. Anyway, so the computer says Aaron will not, or the computer says that I will not make this a 511 thoughts. And so with that knowledge, I am able to then say, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to actually now make it, right? So it's interesting. So the computer predicts, and the computer is aware of my defiance, right? I'm a very obstinate person. And the computer can say, well, I know he's obstinate, but he's not this obstinate, because he's going to, he'll be kind of embarrassed to do this. And so the question is sort of, can I defy some notion of, in other words, could I have acted sort of otherwise, right? It's interesting. This is sort of the idea, is that this shows that you can defy sort of acting otherwise, right? And it's interesting because I guess like if we just think about it, right, like it's really hard to say like you could in other words, like I'm well aware that I have a freedom of choice, and this is sort of the subjective point of view, right? So I am free to I'm free to post this video or not, right? And the question is, predict my behavior, right? Will I do it? But the point is that knowing what your prediction is, I defy you. But at the same time, I also am free at any point, right? So I I don't know. Maybe I'll have to rewatch this. I don't know exactly what this proves. There's a big question about could I have acted otherwise in any given decision, right? And I think I don't know if that really like I said, I think I probably have to read. You always hate to miss the point, but I don't know. Like in other words, like to me, there has to be a sort of meaningful subjective, the point of view from the subjective view, right? One of the things that I was thinking of that you could do, right, is you could say, well, the computer knows how I'm going to react to their prediction, especially when I discover their prediction, right? And so the computer can sort of now the problem is that the computer predicts, and then it predicts in a way that it knows that I'm going to receive that information. So it's interesting. So they might predict that I won't do it. In other words, like all I have to do is defy it. It's interesting, right? But at the same time, that in itself is predictable, right? But the point is that one of the things that I think I've never really liked is that prediction is not sort of like, in other words, like it makes no sense to me. And maybe this is a question of the day, right? It makes no sense to me to say that determinism wins because of at any given moment you cannot change what you're going to do, right? Here, like I said, here we're deciding something, right? And there's a decision that I think I'm as free. I don't know that you can decide a freer choice. Now, one thing I was going to say, which I keep getting, is maybe you can have sort of a random number generator, right? And I can say, random number generator, and then if it's odd, then I will, I'll post this. If it's even, I won't, right? And so, this presumably is totally unpredictable. I mean, you have a 50-50 shot, but it's basically like flipping a coin, except there's no sort of wind resistance or whatever, right? And the point is that, like, you can say this is infinity. I don't know where the infinity sign is, but you could just sort of say 1 to infinity, odd or even, let's go, right? And it doesn't like that. That's so weird. Okay, yeah, so if it's odd, then and this is sort of one of the things. So in other words, I'm free to allow additional factors influence the algorithm that I choose. And so what you would want to do is you wouldn't want to say, we're predicting this algorithm that he's going to use. He's going to, maybe I'll call my parents, maybe I'll sort of, do a random number generator. And I will, I'll sort of my point is to say that, like, I've never really understood is what this necessarily has to do with the freedom of choice, especially in a sort of objective sense, but also in the sort of, more importantly, like we talk about, the sort of subjective sense, right? Like, I subjectively feel that it is my freedom to post or not to post, right? And that's something that the computer can predict my tendency. Right. There's two things I can do. Right. So, however you weight those two things, you're weighting them at most, at least 50% on one of them, or at most, sort of 99.99%. Right. But that's because it's a binary choice. Right. And it's sort of like, but the choice, but I subjectively feel it's my choice. And the point is to say that what will determine the factor? Well, whatever causes my conscious, sort of thing, especially my decision framework will determine that factor. But I don't know what that has to do with me being able to use that algorithm, right? I am free to adopt a decision algorithm. And if I'm free to adopt a decision algorithm, then, it's sort of like that's my algorithm that I adopt, right? That you might in other words, I never liked this idea that prediction destroys freedom of will. And that's something that people really sort of hone in on, that this idea that everything's predictable because we can just say there's a tendency, right? It'll rain, I predict that it'll rain in the next 2 years, 100% certain it'll rain in the next 2 years. And it's sort of like, well, yeah, okay, but what are you actually saying? And to me, like, you'll predict that I'll get up eventually. I'm sitting down, right? I don't know. It's interesting. I think I totally botched the response or whatever. My response was to add in sort of the sort of idea of random. I think he was saying that this sort of destroys hard determinism because you can always defy, and in other words, you can always add a layer to your decision making tree, right? And that's sort of the point, right? You can always add a layer, whatever decision making tree you use, whatever sort of algorithm you use, you can always just add a layer. And the point is, we can predict how you do that, but that doesn't take away your ability to do so. And I really do believe that ability to do so is what constitutes a subjective feeling of free will. And to me, that's all you really need, right? So it's clear weird. This is low quality. Will I post? You'll find out. Have a good one, guys.